Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Shank's Children's Lit Fun Time Hour, or however long it lasts. Um, Welcome back. I've enjoyed corresponding with many of you, if not most of you, over the last couple of days as you sent in your responses to the first assignment. And I was very impressed by the answers to that assignment. And we're going to take a little bit of time at the end of the class today. I've posted these. I like to compile all of these and then share them with you. Usually, if this were a regular class in a regular classroom, I usually use, like the second class of the semester as kind of a get acquainted session where people share what they wrote about for that first assignment, including the kind of books they like to read, and then some of their suggestions on what kinds of books would be good for certain ages and how they would meet certain criteria and needs of students and kids, which was part of what the first assignment was all about. So usually we do that in class, and people get a chance to know one another. And a lot of times when somebody offers an example from their past when they were kids of a book that they really enjoyed, somebody else in the class will go, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I love that book." So obviously we can't have that kind of interaction online, but I encourage you to look over your fellow students' answers to that first assignment, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit at the end of class. Like I said, I got a lot to cover today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that'll kind of be the cap of what we do today. And again, I promise not all of the video lectures will last as long as this one will, or the one on Monday. But I still have a lot of kind of introductory stuff to cover. And then I have a pretty solid assignment, both reading and writing for you for the weekend. So I want to make sure I explain that and cover that. So that's what's on tap today. Among other things, I'm going to talk about the author profile, which is the second outside assignment that each of you are going to be asked to do. That's not due until like week 5, I believe it is in the syllabus, but I like to assign it early, get it out of the way, explain it so you can start preparing for it. So I'm going to talk about the author profile. I have a couple of things I want to touch on by way of introduction, including reasons why books are banned and challenged, because this will be an issue that's going to come up in some of the books that we do uh, as a class. And then it might also be an issue that might come up in the work that you are presenting. So it's an issue that you should address as part of your presentation. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to go over the basic, or at least acknowledge the basic literature terms that you should be familiar with and are responsible for, because a lot of times we'll be doing content analysis, which includes, applying literature terms and concepts to the different works that we're going to cover. So I wanted to make sure we presented those terms early in the semester. I think most of these, particularly if you are English majors, are probably familiar. This is all review, but there is a big long list of literature terms in the Canvas that I want you to be responsible for. And I encourage you that if there are a few listed that you don't know the definitions to, just look up a quick definition on Google so you can familiarize yourself with those. So I want to talk about that. And then really the main thing I want to touch on today is we are going to start looking at picture books as our first our first genre, excuse me. And I want to go over the criteria that we look for when we uh, assess picture books. And then you are going to have the opportunity over the weekend to choose a couple of picture books of your own and do some analysis, apply some of these criteria to these different picture books. So that's going to be one of the main assignments over the weekend. And so I wanted to talk about the picture book criteria that we use. Um, and then we're also going to start introducing mythology next week. And so I'm going to ask you to start reading The Hunger Games for next week. So that's what we're going to be talking about and covering today in our video. Like I said, it's quite a bit to cover. Let me give you our first number, by the way. Number seven, number seven today. Also, one other announcement before I explain the assignment due by Sunday at midnight. Um, Most of you have turned in your preferences for the presentations. Some of you have not. Please do that in the next few days, or as soon as possible, really. This video is going out on Thursday morning. I would like to get everybody's preferences by, say, Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening, and I will send a separate email announcing who is in which group, hopefully by Thursday evening. So everybody should know by, well, this video is being posted on Thursday morning. So hopefully by tonight, you'll get an email letting you know what group you're going to be in. And I'm going by preferences. I had a lot of people list fantasy as number one. So I don't know if I can honor everybody's choice for fantasy. But um, anyway, as I said in the first video, my first priority is to try to get an equal number of people in each group. So you may not get your first choice, but hopefully you'll get your second or your third choice. And I should be able to figure those out. So again, most importantly, some of you have kind of come to the class a little bit late, and that's okay. The first week I know tends to be a little bit hectic and confusing, but I really would like to get your preferences by the end of today so I can send out an email letting everybody know what group they're in. If I don't hear from you within the next day or two, I may just assign you a group. All right, so I really would rather go by preferences, but if I hear nothing back from you, I may go ahead and fill in at different groups where they may be needed. So anyway, if you've sent in your preferences, you're set. I have acknowledged that, and like I said, I should be able to announce by the end of Thursday or Friday what group you'll be in. And the presentations for picture books actually will be due the following Monday. So if you're in the picture book group of presentations, you'll be the first to go, and then they'll carry on over the course of the semester. All right, so let me share with you first the assignment for uh, Sunday by midnight, and then I'll have a Monday video uh, covering this material. Um, and I'm sorry, um, I forgot to do this. I'm going to have to do this in the next couple of days. Um, Throughout my classes, a lot of times uh, I have included pictures of my cat Charlie. And this past semester, one of the things I had to do over break was to um, erase the pictures because it was kind of maudlin and sad. I forgot to do that. So actually, I forgot to do that in another file, the author profile file. There's a picture of him. So bear with me. That's Charlie, or was Charlie. Sorry, he was a beautiful kitty, and he loved the Hunger Games. He particularly was fond of Jennifer Lawrence. He loved Jennifer Lawrence. And anyway, um, oh, by the way, if you have any four-legged friends in your household and you'd like to share pictures of them by email when you're sending me correspondence, I would love to see your four-legged friends. They are family and we love them and they're an important part of our lives. So I always enjoy seeing pictures of kitties, dogs. Some of you have more exotic pets than that. I had somebody last semester showed me a picture of their pet ferret, and I enjoyed that a lot. So again, that's Charlie there, and like I said, he loved the Hunger Games. Anyway, the next assignment due by midnight Monday, June 29th, is obviously to watch this lecture and take note of the numbers I'm mentioning in sequence. So I've already given you one number. I'm going to cross these off while I'm talking about them. First number was number 7. So make sure you include that in your email or I will not accept the assignment. It's part of it's part of the requirement. It shows me that you stayed with me for the hour and whatever. Okay. Now, there is a 30-point take-home quiz in which I'm going to ask you to take a look at a couple of picture books and do some brief analysis of each one. We call it the capsule critique assignment. It is in Canvas, and I will be explaining that today in a little bit. Also, I'm going to ask you to start reading The Hunger Games. It's set up in 3 parts, and I'm going to ask you to read parts 1 and 2 for the weekend before Monday. And then the second take-home quiz is that there are a series of questions, mostly basically comprehension questions, just to make sure you read the book or have read parts 1 and 2. There are a series of questions on the Hunger Games, and you'll see these listed in Canvas. And I would like you to answer those questions as well. And this is a little confusing, but lecture numbers in sequence. Well, I already said that. I probably should have cut that out. And put both of these take-home quizzes, so to speak, in the same email. All right, so you don't have to give me the capsule critique in one email and the Hunger Games answers in the other. Put them in the same email. That'll cut down on the number of emails I get. But each of them will count as a separate take-home quiz. Okay, so that's the main thing. And then there are some supplemental readings I'm going to ask you to do in the Canvas. There's a file called Myth Notes. Please read this, because the reason I'm choosing the Hunger Games is that I mentioned this in the first video. There are a lot of mythological elements and conventions in the Hunger Games. And so that's among some of the things we're going to be focusing on. Also read the file entitled Classical Archetypes. There you'll see a whole list of these kind of archetypes and conventions we see in mythology. And as you're looking them over, you might say to yourself, boy, I see a lot of these in the Hunger Games. Or I know from reading your responses, a number of you are Percy Jackson fans. And boy, oh boy, that work really shows the mythological conventions too. I'm hoping somebody will present that in the myth group, by the way. And then in the packet, 68 to 85, read those pages as well. So there's some reading, also 2 separate take-home quizzes that you put in the same email. All right, let me know if you have any questions about that. You shouldn't have any trouble finding this assignment in Canvas and then the different files that you'll need to see to do those things. Okay. All right, let me give you another number. How about 14? 14 is our second number. All right, the next thing I wanted to do is officially assign the author profile assignment that will be due later in the semester. I had you look this over for today, but I'll review it now. So let me get to that. I got a little glitch here. Just a minute. Hang on a minute. All right, I made a little mistake there. I went to the wrong thing. I was wondering how long it was going to take me before I made a goof, and it didn't take long. But here we go. Here it is. All right, and again, there's Charlie in default mode. That was his default mode, which is another way of saying he liked to take a lot of naps. Over the summer, I was always curious about what he did all day when I was gone. And the answer turned out to be not a hell of a lot. He would just kind of lay around and wait for me to feed him. But anyway, enough about Charlie. Here's what I'm asking you to do for the author profile report. I mentioned the first day that one of the goals of the course is to learn a little bit about some of the more prominent authors and illustrators that are in the field of children's lit. And as you'll notice here on the second page here, I just sort of brainstormed one day and I listed a whole bunch, and then I've kind of added to the list over the years. Some of these are authors and illustrators that go way back. Some of them are more recent. Um, I have a feeling that many of you may have favorites that aren't even on this list. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it updated, but it's hard to do because this is such a growing field and there's new people who enter it all the time. So I'm going to ask you to choose an author or illustrator, or maybe in some cases they're both, um, and do an author profile report for the class. Now, we only have about 20 people in class. It's more fun to do this when we have like 30 or 35 because then we get a lot of authors shared. But it's still a worthwhile assignment and thing to share in the class. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Choose an author or illustrator in the area of children's literature. And if you have any questions about whether or not your chosen person is appropriate for uh, children's literature, you can just shoot me an email and ask me. If you pick any of the people on this list, you're in good shape. But like I said, you may have somebody in mind that's not on this list. Um, just check it out with me first if you have any questions. All right, and what I'd like you to do is try to do this all in one single spaced page. Way back in the day, what I used to do is I used to have students put all of their information on one page and then actually make hard copies that they would pass out to the rest of the class. Well, I haven't done that in years, but I would like you to try to put as much information on one sheet of paper, and I'm going to share examples of this in a minute, in which you do a number of things for your author. Number one, what you want to do is include the author's name, obviously, and the dates. So, year they were born, year they died, or maybe they're still around. Hopefully, they're still around. All right. Then do a little bit of research and find some interesting, relevant background information about the author. Anything that you might want to share in a few sentences, particularly if they are they've won awards perhaps or whatever. What are they best known for? Do they work in a particular genre? Um, that's something you could tell us about in a sentence or two. Do they write primarily for real young ones, or are they more toward tweens or maybe even getting into young adults? So, what stage do they tend to write for? Are they primarily picture book authors or are they chapter book authors? Are they primarily historical fiction authors? So, tell us a little bit about the kinds of works that they are best known for. And then what you'd like to do is to share with us, excuse me, a listing of the different works that the author is responsible for. And we're going to see some examples of this in a minute. Some of these authors are really prolific and have written literally dozens of works. Now, in your author profile, you don't have to list each and every book that they have written, because, like I said, you may pick somebody, you know, who's written literally 100 books, and you don't want to have to put all of those in. But maybe share with us at least 6 to 10 to 12 of their maybe best known works. Again, if it's somebody who's written a lot of books, if they've only written 3 or 4 books, then just put the 3 or 4 books down. So list some of the works that the author is responsible for, best known for. And then I would like you to choose one of the books that they have written and do a brief analysis and summary of that work. So, what you'll do in a pretty good sized paragraph is to first, in a few sentences, be very concise, but give us a brief plot summary of the work. And then, how does it meet the criteria that we have established for the genre that the book belongs to? And this is something you'll be able to do by week 5. Okay. So if it is a picture book, how does it meet the criteria for a good picture book? Or if you want to be more general, how does it meet some of the different criteria that we established in the video on Monday? Remember, on Monday, I spent most of the period talking about, these are the general things we look for when we analyze works for children's literature, regardless of the genre. Or how does it meet some of the needs that I went over on Monday? So there's any number of things you can talk about. So analyze give me a plot summary, and then do a brief analysis of the particular work. Now, EC means extra credit. If you do happen to be an education major, you might want to add a sentence or two in which you maybe talk about how you might approach teaching this book someday to a class of, well, whatever age and grade you deem it to be appropriate for. Now, here's one change. Obviously, we're online. So it says turn in one hard copy for me and also email a Word doc. You're just going to email me the Word doc. All right. And then eventually on I think it's due week 5, you'll send all these in to me, and then I'm going to compile all these and I'll put them on Canvas so everybody can kind of read everybody's author profile. Uh, it's not something I'm going to make you responsible for the final exam. I'm not going to ask any questions about the author profiles like I would do for the presentations. It's just something a little bit extra that I find interesting, and I think students have enjoyed it too. They've told me in the past they enjoyed reading about other authors, and it's kind of maybe reading about somebody they never heard of, and they said that person sounds interesting, or those books sound interesting. I think I might want to check those out. So that's really kind of the purpose of the author profile, to get to know some of the names that are famous in the area of children's literature. Some of the names maybe you've heard of, some of them maybe you haven't, but here's a chance to learn a little bit about them. Okay, so that's the author profile, the assignment. And then let me share with you. Again, I'm having a glitch here. Hang on. All right, I think I got it. Here we go. I wanted to share with you, and I asked you to look this over. This is in Canvas. Here are a couple of examples of author profiles that have been done in the past. And again, everything is on one page. And I thought I'd share with you first an example of one that was okay, but didn't do quite what I wanted. And by the way, these are each worth a total of 50 quiz points. So remember, the presentation is 100 quiz points. This is 50. And this one was a author profile of Cynthia Voigt. And actually, this opening paragraph was pretty good. Indicated when she was born, gave some interesting information about her life. Also included the idea that she won a Newbery Medal for her work. So she's won a couple of awards. So that was pretty well done. Here's where the issue comes in. Again, you want to try to put as much information on one single page as you can. So when she listed Cynthia Voigt's works, she could have made 2 different lists and then saved some space. And then here's the real issue with this author profile. She decided to talk about homecoming, and actually does a decent job of summarizing the plot in a few sentences. But maybe the most important part of the author profile is when it comes to the analysis of the particular work. And she says, Homecoming is an excellent example of contemporary realistic fiction. And then I'm counting like 3 sentences, she's very vague and very rushed in the analysis. So by the time she got to this part, she was at the end of the page, and I think she was running out of space, and she rushed maybe the most important part of the author profile. So this is how it should look, except that you can use the space more efficiently. And I'll share with you a couple of examples of this. Here was one that was done for Eric Carle. Geez, 18 years ago. Maybe I should update these. Anyway, does a really nice job of summarizing Eric Carle's life and some interesting information about him and some of the work that he's most familiar with and responsible for and the awards he's won, etc. Then here's one of the guys I was talking about. He was very prolific as an author, and so he wrote a lot of things. And this student effectively used the space on the page, 3 different lists to include all of these. And I think everybody's familiar with The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and that's the one I read that when I was a kid. And then the student chooses to single out the mixed up chameleon, does a really nice job of summarizing the plot, and then takes a little bit more time than our first example to actually do some analysis of the work and why it's very effective. Here's another one on Leslie Newman, um, who is responsible for one of the most influential and controversial picture books in the last 50 years. She wrote a picture book called Heather Has Two Mommies. Maybe you've read that or are familiar with that. So again, very well done. First paragraph gives a summary of her life and noteworthy elements in it. Gives two lists of works that she's responsible for, excuse me, and then does focus on telling us a little bit about the very influential picture book called Heather Has Two Mommies. Uh, Describes the plot in a lot of detail, includes a discussion and analysis of the illustrations as well. All right, so these last two are more along the lines of what I'd like to see from you. The first one the first one was like a C plus, got 38 out of 50 because there were some good things about it, but much more could have been done in the space that was allotted. So again, the author profiles will be due by Thursday, July 4th. I'm sorry, excuse me, July 24th. Excuse me. I didn't want to give you a heart attack. Thursday, July 24th. That's week 5. So that's like 4 weeks away, basically. All right. So that's the author profile. And again, it's your choice. I'm not going to assign authors to you. Like I said, we have about 20 people in class. Hopefully, we won't have 2 people do the same one. I think maybe at some point I might ask you as part of an email to send me your tentative choice for an author. And then if I do see that like 3 people did J.K. Rowling or whatever, I might email you back and say, could you do somebody else so we have like 20 different ones and not too many, not duplicates. So hopefully that won't be the case. But if that's the case, that's probably what I will do because I would like to have like 20 different people. But like I said, there's so many to choose from that hopefully in a class of 20, we shouldn't have any duplications. All right, let's give another number here. Third number is 19. 19. All right, the next thing I want to cover is by way of introduction to the course. And in fact, the next 2 things I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to kind of cover them briefly, but you will be responsible for this information. And these are going to be things that will be coming up in the course of our conversations. Well, not conversations literally, but in our discussions about the different works that I'm going to have you read, and then also the works that you may be presenting. So the first thing I wanted to take on, and I had you take a look at this for today, so it shouldn't be anything really new, is I wanted to talk a little bit about an issue that I think has become particularly important in the last few years, and that is the issue of what kinds of works should be taught to children and what kinds perhaps should not be taught. And this is obviously a very important discussion that involves our children and also involves our teachers. And again, if you're a prospective teacher, you're going to be running into these issues. A couple of I should say maybe more than a couple, several of the books that we are going to be looking at this semester have been on banned and challenged book lists in the past. And I think I mentioned this in passing, in passing the first lecture. Maybe these questions may apply to the work that you want to present. So you should be willing and able and ready to maybe discuss a little bit about potential issues with the work that you've chosen and how you might answer those who would say, you know what, I'm not sure I really want children to read this particular book or watch this particular movie. Like I said, in your presentations, you can do movies and TV shows as well. And so I thought in the beginning of the semester, I always like to start with you know, pretty much a brief discussion about the different reasons why books and movies and TV shows over the past years have been uh, banned outright, or at least their use has been challenged by people in different school districts, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a pretty solid, consistent list. Um, and it's pretty much an order of occurrence. So I don't have the specific numbers here, but offensive language tends to be the number one reason why books are banned or challenged for kids. And then you see the other reasons. Uh, some might be considered too sexually explicit for children or young adults. Um, I guess other, I don't know why I laugh at this, but when I see the other, it's like, holy crap, the other must be really awful if it's not any of these things that are already listed. So other, I guess, would be anything, well, other than the ones that are already listed here. And I'm just trying to imagine what those others might be. Um, Unsuited to age group, personally, and you don't have to agree with me, this is a discussion class. I'm a pretty open-minded person. I'm all for free speech, and I'm pretty much anti-censorship. But uh, of all the different potential criticisms of works and whether or not children should have access to them, I think this one to me has the most validity. Um, if you're arguing that a child of 8 maybe shouldn't read this book, maybe they should wait until they're 10 or 12 or 13, and you have good reasons for that, I'm more inclined to kind of go along with that. I think that's another reason why age appropriateness and knowing our audience is particularly important. And I went over that in Monday's video. So yeah, I understand that. I think certainly we can all agree that there are certain books or movies or TV shows that children need to be old enough and mature enough um, to watch. And so I have some sympathy for that particular reason. But to say that this book should never be read by anybody or anybody until they're adults, that's where I get a little bit, you know, my free speech, First Amendment dander gets up a little bit. But again, some of you may, I know at least a couple of you have children of your own, and I think you could probably also sympathize with this argument. I'm sure there's certain books that, you know, you would not want your children to be exposed to until you think they're old enough to handle it. I understand that. All right, other reasons why books are banned or challenged, maybe too violent, maybe they deal with the occult or Satanism. Um, you may not be old enough to remember this, but I am. When the Harry Potter books first came out, there was a big to-do and a big controversy because a lot of people thought, it dealt with the occult and witchcraft and so on. I think, well, of course, now there are objections to Harry Potter, at least the author, for other reasons, which I won't get into. But at the time, there was criticism about that. Uh, Maybe the book deals with homosexuality. Maybe it promotes a religious viewpoint or a political viewpoint. Maybe it deals with drugs or racism or nudity or sex education. Maybe it's anti-family. One of my favorite children's poets, Shel Silverstein, a lot of his works are banned or challenged because some of his poems are considered anti-family, just as one example. Insensitivity, inaccurate information. This might be particularly important in historical fiction for kids. Maybe the work deals with suicide or is anti-ethnic. Maybe it deals with abortion. Maybe it deals with sexist or has sexist views or gives sexist opinions. And I don't know why I always laugh at this too. I know gambling is a serious addiction, but oh my God, gambling. Oh, there's gambling in the story. I don't know. I don't know. Some of them seem more serious than others. But anyway, these are the general reasons why books are banned or challenged. I found this from one source. And then I found another source, which is kind of repeats some of these, but maybe goes into some of them in a little bit more detail. So racial issues, encouraging racism, encouraging whatever they consider to be damaging lifestyles, whatever that is. blasphemous dialogue, sexual situations, violence, again, is repeated, presence of witchcraft, maybe religious affiliations are included in the book, a political bias. And again, of all of these, I think this is the one I think we might pay the most attention to. Um, it's just age inappropriate. And I can agree with that. I think, again, there's a lot of books that, maybe are geared for young adults, but I'm not sure I'd want a child to read until they are young adults for a variety of different reasons. Um, so be aware of this. This might be a question I might ask you on the midterm. What are some reasons why books are banned or challenged? Or I might ask you to apply some of these to, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, for example, has been on book banned and challenged book lists. Uh, Bridge to Terabithia, another book we're going to do, has been on banned and challenged book lists. So when we get to some of these works, that question will come up, and I might ask you to comment on that question and give your opinion. And again, this is a good time for me to say that all opinions expressed in this class will be given my full attention. And again, I try not to reveal my inclinations in any way. This is an open discussion and an open forum. So let me make that clear. This is a good time to say that and do that. And of course, if this were in a regular classroom situation where people actually were sitting in a room and talking, it would be even more essential to establish that. But even in an online class, I think all viewpoints will be listened to. So anyway, so be familiar with the different reasons why books are banned or challenged. And particularly if you are presenting a book and one of the first things you might want to do is just check out and see, are there any controversies around the book I'm presenting? And what are the issues? What are the concerns? What are the objections? And maybe part of my presentation, maybe a paragraph or two, would be to discuss some of these issues and my response to them. Is this a book that I would defend against these criticisms and concerns? Or in some cases, can I maybe agree with some of the criticisms and concerns? I think that's an important consideration when we are analyzing a work. So that's something I'm going to ask you to do. All right, so that is reasons why books are banned or challenged. I had to stop the recording just now. I had a visitor, Miranda, from our class, just stopped in. So hi, Miranda. Um, anyway, so those are the reasons why books are banned or challenged. And again, be familiar with those. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly is something that will come up throughout the course of our conversations, maybe in questions I ask you for analysis or maybe on a midterm or a final. And that is to be able to apply basic literature concepts to the different works that we are covering. So I ask you to look this over for today as well. And again, as I mentioned previously, I would imagine most of these are pretty familiar to you in our review. 12 years of English classes in school, and then maybe a couple of other years in college of English classes. I'm sure that you've gone over these. If there's any that you don't know, um, take a minute or two to look over the definitions of each, because again, they may come up in our discussion. I may ask you about them on a take-home quiz. I might ask you to apply them to a work that we've talked about uh, for a midterm or a final exam question. Some of the ones that will be particularly relevant to our class. Again, we're going to be talking about mythology, so we're going to be talking about archetypes. We're going to be talking about, I have archetypes twice there. Conventions and motifs. A couple of other things that are going to be particularly important. I think I should point out a couple of things right away. Obviously, if I'm asking you about the setting of the story, obviously I'm asking you about where it takes place, but also don't forget to include the time period, because a lot of times that can be important in understanding the story and how the characters act the way they do and the kinds of things they say. Of course, that'll be particularly important in historical fiction, but I think it's important in a lot of the other books that we read. Uh, the Bridge to Terabithia, for example, there are certain things that happened in that story that was published in the late 70s that probably are dated and could not happen in the same way today. And so students need to be aware of the different time periods and how things were different back. I hate to call the late 70s back in the day, but well, I guess that shows how old I am. So setting means both time and place. Also, another one, if I ask you for the theme of the story, I'm not asking you for a one word answer. So don't say the theme of this story is love or unity or racism or don't, that's the subject. That's what it's about. When I ask you for a theme of the story, I'm asking you for uh, what's the message? What's the lesson? What's the moral of the story? Going back to a term that we see in fairy tales and folk tales. Um, yeah, what's the moral of the story? What can a young person, a child, get from the story? What can they learn about life? What do they learn about love? What do they learn about racism? So don't give me a one word answer. Give me a statement, a message, a lesson, a moral to the story. Okay. So again, I think most of these are pretty familiar, should be pretty familiar to you. Um, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. And again, one of the ways you might want to analyze the work that you are doing in your presentation is maybe to talk about, be specific about some of the things that you find effective in the story. And it might include discussion of things like, well, I really enjoyed the point of view in the story. The narration is very strong. And this is why I think the choice of narrator is a good one. Or I love the figures of speech that were used. It's a heavily symbolic story, so much so that that might be something I might focus on in my presentation. We're obviously going to be talking about genres, so a big part of the presentation is to explain why this work is a good example of the given genre that it falls into. So again, excellent use of imagery, or maybe the book uses flashback techniques effectively, uh, et cetera, et cetera. So uh, look up any of the ones that you're not familiar with uh, by way of preparing for anything we might talk about later on in the course of the next, well, 6 weeks, right? All right, and these are in Canvas again, so you can see those. So be familiar with the different literature terms. All right, the main gist of today is we are going to start talking about our first major genre that we're going to analyze in class, and that is picture books. And so this is in your Canvas, and I had you look this over. So I said on Monday, we're going to look at every work with two sets of criteria. One set of criteria is going to be the general list of things that we use to analyze any work, regardless of the genre, general criteria. And I went over those on Monday. Now, for each specific genre, there are questions and points that we can consider to help us decide whether or not this is a really good picture book, you know? So, a child might just read the picture book or have it read to them and say, I love this book. And they may not be able to pinpoint why they love it so much, but it's up to us as mature adults. Well, at least you are. I'll leave myself out of it. To actually stop and think about, why does this one work so well? You know, why is it so effective? Why did I love it as a kid? Maybe you didn't have the terminology when you were a kid to try to explain why you loved it so much, or why you loved it when your parents read it to you or whatever. But now we have the terminology and we have the criteria to use to do some analysis. And that's what we're going to do. And that's one of the major assignments you're going to do over the weekend is you're going to look up and you're going to find a couple of picture books of your own choosing. And you're going to do a brief critique of each of the picture books. And these are the kinds of things I'm going to ask you to talk about. So the first level or the first category would be basically judging it on its content. And what you don't want to have is these questions asked in a yes or no format. So notice how most of the questions begin with the word how. So you're not just saying it does these things, but you're going to try to explain or pinpoint how it achieves these goals. So, how appropriate is the content of the book for its intended age level? So, one of the first things you'll do is tell me, I think this picture book would be great for preschoolers, maybe children who don't even know how to read yet, but it's almost all visual, or it's something a child with very basic vocabulary skills could get through. Or you might say, this is a picture book that might be more suited for a second, third, fourth grader. We tend to think of picture books as just books for little kids, but, kids as old as, 12, 13 years old can enjoy picture books. And it helps, it leads into maybe their interest in graphic novels, for example, which is really kind of the next step, isn't it? Or comic books. I was a big comic book fan when I was a kid. So, a comic book is basically a picture book, uh, so to speak. Um, how is this a book that will appeal to children, or is it really written for adults? And sometimes you can tell the difference there. Again, setting. When and where does it take place? How does the author portray this? And how or why is the setting important to the story? That's something we might talk about, or you might consider. How are the characters well delineated and developed? Or maybe they're not. Are stereotypes regarding race, gender, or others present? And if so, is this a deciding factor? A lot of times we look at picture books that were very popular and maybe even popular to us as kids. And I know this is true of me because I'm so much older than you. I would imagine that the number of a number of the picture books that I read when I was a child or was read to me, might not be considered appropriate in terms of content to our more enlightened age of the 21st century. At least I'd like to think we're more enlightened. So that might be a factor. Maybe it's like there's aspects of this book I really love, but some of the messages are a little bit dated or whatever. And it kind of goes back to, reasons why books are banned or challenged. I don't think I would ban or challenge any book, but, I might say, instead of this book that deals with this particular issue, I might pick another one that doesn't have the same racial stereotypes as book one does. I mean, you say I'll pick this one and not that one. It's not so much I'm banning it. It's just I'm going to try to find a better choice that might be more appropriate to the 21st century. All right, what is the quality of the language of the text? What is the theme? What is is there a message, moral or lesson to be taken from the story? Now, sometimes it may not be. It might just be a cute story that really doesn't have a lesson. But if there is one, that's something that you might want to talk about and consider. Obviously, if it's a picture book, we're going to be analyzing the illustrations. The big question is, how do the illustrations help put the story over and help in the telling of the story, right? How are the pictures made an integral part of the text? How do the illustrations enhance the story? Is the style of the illustrations appropriate and effective for the given story? Where the setting calls for it, how are the illustrations authentic in detail? A lot of picture books are historical fiction. All right. So they would use a more historically accurate style of art to try to make it as realistic or as historically accurate as possible. All right. Another thing to consider, and there's a separate file on style, which I'll get to in Canvas in a minute. What medium has the illustrator chosen to use? And again, does it work for the story? Things like line, shape, and color. Maybe even more important is, again, how would you describe the style of the illustrations used? And one of the trends in more recent picture books over the last 10, 15, 20 years is a lot of stories don't stick to one style. It's a conglomerate. It's a mix of styles. It's kind of a postmodern approach to picture books. The author decided I'm not going to stick to one style of art to tell my story. So I may use a variety of mediums. I might use a variety of styles. I'm not going to stick to just one. And one of the books you do I'm sorry, your capsule critique for may fall under that category. It's like I can't really pinpoint one style. There's a lot of different styles used. So comment on that. How is that effective? It's obviously a choice the author made and the illustrator made for the author, and maybe the author and illustrator are the same person. So why do you suppose they chose to mix it up and not stick to one particular style? Um, and again, if they varied the style technique, how did they do that? And why did they do that, do you suppose? And was it effective, bottom line? Um, Also, some other things you can comment on is just the basic structure, the physical structure of the book and the format. Um, some picture books are really small, others are huge. Um, so does the size of the book seem appropriate to the content and age level of the reader? Might comment on things like the jacket design, the cover, the title page, um, the typeface that's used might be an important consideration. Um, so we're talking about the physical durability of the book. I know the best example I can come up with that kind of talks about this issue is I'm sure you're all familiar with pop-up books for kids, pop-up picture books, where you open each page and the paper opens up and there's a little building there or whatever, and you turn the next page and then other things pop up. Uh, these are fun and interesting, but again, you got to be age appropriate. If you give a pop-up book to a 2-year old, it'll probably be destroyed in a half hour. Um, they're very susceptible to ripping and tearing and whatever. So that's the kind of thing to consider maybe in terms of age appropriateness. I wouldn't put this pop-up book in the hands of a 2-year old because most 2-year olds like to pull and tug and whatever, and pretty soon there'd be no pop-up book left. And then finally, again, format might not be as important as the other considerations, but if it's something that you find particularly noteworthy, you might want to talk about it. And then finally, as part of it, maybe an overall evaluation, you might talk about this. If you're familiar with the work of the author and you've read several of their works, or you're familiar with the work of the illustrator, you might take on these questions. How is the work similar or different to from other books by this author? How is it similar? You might do a little bit of research. This will come up more for the final paper, not so much for the presentation. But you might look into what reviewers had to say about the work and then maybe comment on your opinions. Do you agree with the criticisms? Do you agree with the praises? Chances are you're going to be choosing for your presentation a work that you enjoy. And chances are for the capsule critique, which you're doing for this weekend, chances are you're going to pick 2 books that you enjoyed. I might suggest this, though, now that I'm thinking about it. For the weekend assignment, I mean, if you're going to your local library or whatever, and you're just looking up some picture books, and by the way, I have a couple of things in Canvas that might help you pick books if you're just totally in the dark about choosing picture books. I'll get to that in a second. I might suggest that you pick a picture book that you read through and you didn't like too much. That would maybe give you something to talk about, and you could comment on. I thought the illustrations weren't very good for a variety of reasons. I thought the style of art didn't fit. I didn't think the story was compelling enough. I thought the vocabulary was too much. You might have legitimate criticisms as opposed to saying, "Well, I love the illustrations, I love the story, I love this, I love that." So you don't have to do this, but I might suggest that of the 2 books that you do the capsule critique for, you might pick one that you just didn't like very much. Oh, don't let me forget. Let me give you another number. 31. 31 is your next number. Okay? All right. Just forgot to do that. It's been a while since I gave you a number. All right, so how does the work meet any of the general criteria, values, and needs of children's literature that we've established? But then also, how does it meet these criteria specific to picture books? All right, so let me go to the capsule critique. All right, so this is the assignment, one of the assignments I'm going to ask you to do for over the weekend. The other one has to do with the Hunger Games question. All right, so what I want you to do, and it says, and again, don't misunderstand, this was geared, we usually do this in groups in a classroom situation. I usually get a group of people together, and I usually bring in the picture books, the physical copies, and pass them out, and then have the groups look through two of them and do this. So obviously, we can't do it that way online. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to look through your two picture books, and for each one of them, do a brief critique of the picture book, covering the following 10 points. And this doesn't have to be real long. It's not a paper, you're not writing a paper, but I would like you to number it in this way. So, number, give me the title, obviously, and then the name of the author and illustrator. Number two, identify the genre. So even though it's a picture book, obviously it's a picture book, but it might also be a fantasy. It might also be historical fiction. It might also be realistic fiction. It might be science fiction. So if it falls under a category in addition to being a picture book, please note that in number two. Now, for number three, after you've read through the book, what do you think would be the best age and grade, let's say, for this particular book? And explain your answer. This has to do with age appropriateness. So, and your answer would let me know that you kind of understood the different stages that you read about. The first reading I had you do included the ages and stages of childhood. So you might refer back to that Canvas file uh, in, yeah, Canvas file, um, the packet pages that deal with that. All right. So if you say, I think this would be great for first graders, tell me why. Just don't say that. So your answer to that would help me see that you would kind of understand. And again, there's no such thing as a typical anything, but what the typical first grader might be into and their reading level, et cetera, et cetera. So be able in a sentence or two to justify your answer. I think this would be great for a preschooler. I think this would be great for a first grader. I think this would be great for a fifth grader, whatever it might be. All right, I want you to be able to summarize the plot of the story in a sentence or two. All right, I just went over the different literature terms. So I would like you to apply three literature terms that you think are particularly noteworthy um, and comment on each one. It says packet page 20, but actually there is a file in Canvas I just went over that gives the literature terms. So that's the one I would go with. Now, I also went over this today. Do you think there might be, even if it's a picture book for little kids, do you think there might be potential issues that might lead some people to object to children reading it? Any potential issues or reasons why it might be potentially banned or challenged. And again, I just went over the potential reasons why books are banned or challenged. So your answer to six might be, this is a perfectly innocent, innocuous story. I can't see why anybody could possibly object to it. If that's the case, fine. But again, if think in terms of, and you may love the book, but thinks in terms of how somebody else might respond to it. And might there be any potential reason or reasons why uh, somebody might have a problem with this picture book? All right. Comment on the noteworthy usage of elements in the story, line, color, shape, text, et cetera, et cetera. Also comment on the style of art that you think is used. And remember, I said, some of the more recent picture books might use a variety of styles. And I'm about to go over some of the different styles in a minute. Number 8, how does it meet any of the general values and criteria listed in the Canvas file that I went over on Monday? So you're talking about how it meets uh, general criteria, and then also how does it meet some of the picture book criteria that I just went over today. So number 8 is, I think, a key question. Okay. It kind of summarizes what I've been talking about the first 2 days of class. Number 9, do you think this would be a good choice to read aloud and explain? And here's where you might talk about the format of the book. For example, you might say, I love this book, but it's only about this big. So it might be really hard to, show it to a classroom of kids. They might not, only the people in the first row would be able to see it. Nobody would be able to see it in the back. So there might be different reasons why it might not be a really good book to read aloud, or maybe it would be. And then finally, give it a grade from A to F and explain your grade. So that's the capsule critique assignment. Do this for any 2 picture books of your choice. And again, you may have a collection of picture books from your childhood, or maybe you have younger siblings, or maybe you even have kids of your own, and maybe have some picture books lying around. Otherwise, you might want to go to the local library and just kind of look around and poke around and maybe see a few that interest you and pick any 2 from that list. Another thing you might want to do is check this out. I did this the year of COVID, where we had to do everything online. But unlike this class, which is non-synchronous, at least when I taught children's lit during the COVID year, we met from 12:30 to 1:45 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and everybody was involved. And I did a Zoom video, and but we weren't able to do in-class presentations and so on. Like we're not able to do it in class as well. But here are, and I'm not sure all of these are still operational because sometimes they drop out and they're not available anymore. But here are a list of some of the more uh, common picture books that over the years I've shared with the class, or I've had them do peer critiques in class of, or a number of these were picture books that students presented, and I added them to the list because I love them so much. And if you want to see a visual representation of the books, not just the physical copy, I've included uh, links to the different YouTube videos of these books, which is kind of a fun way to, so to speak, read the different books. But most importantly, here are the titles. You don't even necessarily have to watch the YouTube video. You might try to find the hard copy of each of these. Um, but I included as well, you read about the Caldecott winners, very prestigious award, which is given each year to excellent use of illustrations in picture books. So here are some of the more recent Caldecott winners, if you'd like to take a look at some picture books that were considered worthy of the Caldecott. And I've read some of these, and I haven't always agreed. Sometimes, like I said, you might pick a book that won all kinds of awards, and you read through it and you say, you know what, it kind of left me flat, or I didn't really enjoy it. Let me explain why I think it lacked criteria, even though it won all these awards. So certainly you can take that approach if you'd like to. Let me give you another number. I've been kind of lax on my numbers. Next number is 8. Number 8. And I'm trying to think now. Well, I think the ones that have 4 stars are the ones that I tend to share in a regular semester in class. These are the ones I usually get hard copies of and I bring to class, and I have the students do the capsule critiques in small group. And then we do like mini presentations. Now, again, we're not going to have time to do that, but I am, when you turn these in by email, um, and again, Word document, please, not PDF. Please do a Word document. I will compile the capsule critiques. So eventually next week, you'll be able to read everybody's capsule critiques of different picture books. And um, I'm not going to make this a part of the midterm or the final, but just FYI, just for your general information. And a lot of these are very interesting and fun to read. So here are some of the key uh, examples of really good, I think, picture books in the last, well, some of these go back a few years, 50 years, whatever. So you might kind of look over these titles. And again, if you already have two picture books in mind, then all of this is moot. But some of you may not have read much when you were a child or don't have much memories of picture books and really don't know where to go or what kind of titles to look for. All of these are pretty good. And I would imagine just about all of these would be available at the local library. I go to Talmadge local library because it's pretty close to where I live. But I think you can find these titles just about in any children's section of a library. Again, if you have any questions then about the capsule critique or what I'm asking you to do, feel free to ask me about that. Another place you can go, just sort of as an FYI, to find great picture book titles and really recent ones is you'll find this in Canvas. I think I'll just go to Canvas here. And the file called A Mighty Girl's Picture Book Recommendation. There's a great website called A Mighty Girl. I really encourage you to follow that. I follow it on Facebook. Really good source for information about children's literature, etc. And so you can click on this, and here are what they consider to be the top 100 picture books, particularly geared for young girls. And you can see it's a variety of different, some of these are like biographies, some of them are historical, some of them are fantasy. So this is a good example of how picture books can be more than one genre. Also, you'll see, if you see the little gold seal there, that means it was a Caldecott winner. And again, I'm not asking you to buy any of these books, but again, if you look through these and you say, maybe I could see if I can find these at my local library, or maybe you can find them online too. I'm not sure. Maybe you can just read them for free online. Maybe you can. But this is a great source to go to for titles. And even, recommended age. Well, I keep messing this up here. Some are even, categorized according to age appropriateness. So, there are 93 for 3 to 5 preschool, et cetera, et cetera. So, like I said, I can't recommend The Mighty Girl strongly enough, particularly if you're looking for works that have female protagonists. And thankfully, that's a major trend in the last 20, 30, 40 years, particularly in my lifetime. I don't know, when I was a child, there were a lot of picture books or, chapter books for that matter that featured female protagonists. And thank God, now we have many, 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 many really good ones to choose from. So I encourage you to look through that. So that's a great source. All right. And then I wanted to talk about styles of art because that's something you're going to be commenting on. So let's go back to the canvas. And again, I've compiled these from different sources so that you wouldn't have to buy a big textbook that costs $100. So like I said, you can pay me later, you can thank me later, buy me a beer at the end of the semester or whatever. I saved you all kinds of money. This is a website, and I really love this website. It really does a really nice job of, first of all, defining the different kinds of styles, and it's all there. I'm not going to read each of these to you. So the first thing you should do, one of the first things you should do when you're analyzing your picture book, is to decide what style of art or styles. Like I said, a lot of more modern stories are kind of postmodern in the sense they use a lot of different styles of art. But you have abstract, cartoon, folk, impressionism, naive, representational, retro style, romanticism, stylized, and surrealism. And then what I love about this particular website is it actually then shows Smoky Night. That's a great book. Got a Caldecott winner. We've done this in class before. So it goes through and lists some examples of each kind of style of art. So they give some examples of abstract expressionism, for example, and then they go on from there. So be familiar with the different styles of art, not only so that you can help analyze your picture book for the capsule critiques, but also, well, the picture book presenters should obviously focus on styles of art, among other things. But it's also something I might ask you on the midterm or the final. I might say, what are some of the different styles of art? And you should be familiar with those. Okay, let me give you another number, 44. 44. All right, so I think we've covered just about everything I wanted to cover. The last thing I'll touch on, and I'll just throw it out there for you to look at your leisure. Uh, Obviously, if we were in class, uh, we would share our answers to that first take-home quiz assignment I gave you, the opening questions quiz, as I called it. And I mentioned the other day, I think it's, or maybe today, it's really a good way to uh, get to know the people in class and kind of commiserate and share our reading experiences um, from when we were a child and talk about the things we loved when we were kids. And usually there's a lot of back and forth there. In fact, I usually write down the titles on the board and we talk about them. So we're not able to do that. But I thought the next best thing, and again, I'm having a glitch here. Actually, it's not a glitch. It was right there. I just didn't see it. Okay. I compiled at least most of them. Some of you turned them in a little bit late, so I didn't have them ready. But I thought this was very interesting. And take a minute sometime to peruse these. This is in Canvas. It's called, I think it's called Answers to the First Assignment or something like that. Student Answers to the Opening Questions, I think is what it's titled. And I really enjoyed reading all of these. And you guys did a wonderful job of both sharing your own personal reading experiences, but I was particularly interested in your answers to number two, whether you thought reading in children's literature is still relevant. And most of you seemed to say it was, which is encouraging to me. And then I really enjoyed, and this is really helpful for our discussion, um, how you broke down and talked about different books and how they would be really good for particular ages and stages. Because I think that's important to acknowledge age appropriateness. So we have Lydia's here. We have Olivia. I'm sorry. Yeah, Lydia, Olivia. Many of you said you did read a lot as children. Some of you said you didn't read that much. But again, really good examples um, of books that help achieve the goals and criteria and the needs of children. Um, a really good list here of that. And then also nicely done, different books geared for different ages and stages. It's a nice job there. Here's Miranda's. And again, an excellent account of um, how different works help achieve different benefits. So I was very, very impressed by your answers. And as I was scanning some of them, some of them are old standbys, and some of them are titles that I hadn't heard of. So I'm going to look up. I mean, something like Goodnight Moon. I mean, my God, Goodnight Moon is a classic. Um, but something like, well, Pee Wee Scouts, My Weird School. Um, that sounds interesting to me. I'm not familiar with those. I think we're all I think we're all familiar with Captain Underpants, for an example. A lot of people mentioned Harry Potter. A lot of Harry Potter fans, a lot of Percy Jackson fans, I noticed. Um, some good examples of different works that meet different criteria. A couple of classic preschool books here. Brown Bear, What Do You See? And Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. I think most of us have probably experienced those in some form or another. Late elementary, again, Percy Jackson, Harry Potter. Wonder was mentioned by a number of people, and I was happy to see that because I love Wonder. I love the book and I love the movie. And then middle school, as you get a little bit older, um, I'm not familiar with the crossover. I have to read that one. But actually, in my Lit for Young Adults class, we do both The Hunger Games and The Hate You Give. I'm teaching Lit for Young Adults in the fall, by the way. Might as well give you a little plug, or give myself a plug anyway. So these were very well done, and I appreciated you sharing your personal experiences with reading, but then also some really nice examples. A lot of people mentioned Junie B. Jones. That seems to be a real favorite with people. The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. That's an interesting one. My nephew's kids, they don't read much, sadly. In fact, one is a little bit behind in his reading, but the oldest is like 13 now, and he never read much, but he really got into uh, the Diary of a Wimpy Kid's book. So it's interesting what book will trigger somebody's love for reading. Um, so he loves those. Holes, a classic. The Giver, another classic. This is getting toward the end of our age appropriateness and into young adult literature, but they would qualify as children's lit, certainly. Um, Where the Wild Things Are. I used to do a killer version in class of Where the Wild Things Are. Um, I'm not going to do it here. I don't think it would translate well in YouTube. But anyway, um, so again, thank you for your responses. Captain Underpants again mentioned a series of unfortunate events. Very popular, mentioned a lot. Again, Percy Jackson, Harry Potter. Might be the reason why so many people pick fantasy as the number one choice for presentations. So like I said, I may not be able to honor all of those. But if you slip me like if you send me Venmo, like $10, maybe I'll put you at the top of it. I'm kidding, by the way. Um, so yeah, uh, Narnia. Well, we're doing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm always surprised at how many students have read the entire series of books. I wonder if you have. Maybe let me know if you have. We're just doing obviously the first one. Enemy Pie is a great picture book. Pete the Cat. Stimulate cognitive development. Zoboomafoo. Now, I'm not familiar with that. It sounds like it's a TV show, so I guess I have to watch that. So I learned from these too. There's a lot of titles here that I said I'm not familiar with that, but I should get caught up on it. And I loved Claire mentioned The Far Side. I don't know if all of those are necessarily geared for kids, but I love The Far Side. I wish it was still around. All right, so thank you all. Thank you all for contributing. And again, I may not have everybody's in because a couple of them came in a little bit late, which is okay. I realize the first week can be kind of stressful and confusing and whatever. Um, Let me give you one last number, number 50. 50. Okay, so I think we covered everything. It was a lot to cover. I don't know how long this lasted. I guess I'll find out in a minute. I took a number of different breaks too, so that's kind of confusing to me. I'm never sure how long these are. They won't all be this long, but there was a lot of stuff I wanted to cover. So uh, thanks for sticking with me through the second class. This is going to be posted uh, at least by Thursday morning, if not sooner. Again, if you have not turned in your preferences for the presentation, please do that as soon as you possibly can so I can figure out those groups and let you know, hopefully as soon as today, which is Thursday, when this will be posted. If you have any questions about the homework or the assignments that are due by Sunday midnight, please feel free to ask me. Enjoy the rest of your week and into the weekend. Stay cool. It's been pretty hot. I had an interesting couple of days. Our power kept going out. Uh, a major transformer in the area where I live went out for like a day. So it was like being back in the Stone Age. I mean, how did people live without electricity? I have no idea. And the Wi-Fi was out. My God, I didn't, God. So anyway, thank you. And I'll give you a little wave, goodbye. And until what is it? Until next time, until Monday's video, I'll see you. Thank you.